To really understand how 220 Central Park South rose to the top of Billionaires Row, we need to take you back to where it all began.
The site's called youtube.com. It's kind of like Flickr for videos.
College students across the country are, quote, Facebooking.
We have so much data about what people are doing.
When you stand for your liberty, we will stand with you.
Hurricane Katrina barreled ashore.
The breakup of Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston.
This is the new iPod Nano.
It's early 2005, and rumours of a US real estate bubble are looming. Then there's the New York City housing market. During that same year, a potential deal came across the desk of a development firm called Claret Group. It had three of the main ingredients for successful real estate: location, location, and location. The offer was to buy out an unimpressive 20-storey rental building that had a super impressive address. 220 Central Park South could offer sweeping views of the park if a newer and taller tower were put on the site. At the same time, the existing property was nearly half vacant, but still home to some 47 rent-stabilised tenants, people who are protected from sharp increases in their monthly payments.
It was really a smattering of the average New Yorker, from wealthy people to just your middle class people. You had everything from a professor of gerontology to a record producer, actually quite a prominent record producer. He actually occupied the penthouse, and I believe he paid $1,200 a month in rent.
Claret Group saw the opportunity and ran with it. But to gain approval from the state and move forward with a whole new building, they needed money, and lots of it. And with remaining tenants on the site, it wasn't exactly a straightforward process.
There is this particular quirk of law that if you want to demolish a rent-stabilized building, you have to essentially show that you have the financing in place to build something new. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem.
Unable to secure a loan, Claret Group instead sought out a financial partner. Enter Vornado Realty Trust, led by Mr. Steve Roth.
We are a public company, so public, private, sucking up to the public companies.
He's an absolute buccaneer, even though he runs a public company.
His standard is the highest standard I've ever seen.
At that point, the real estate investment group had a market cap of over $10 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
In August 2005, Claret brought Vornado on as a 90% equity partner in the project and ultimately closed the deal at $137 million. But the story doesn't end there. Before they could build what is now 220 Central Park South, work needed to be done, including tearing down the building that was there before and buying enough air rights to build taller, a task that fell to Claret.
Yep, you heard that right. Here in New York, it's not just the buildings for sale, but the air above them too.
Developers can snatch up air rights around their properties and combine them to comply with development limits in the area and build even taller than they could before. The process can take years, but it's what's allowed 220 Central Park South and much of Billionaires Row to rise so high while preventing close neighbours from blocking those awesome views. Now, before you demolish a building, it's polite to ask people to step out of it first. Here, that meant buying out tenants, and to no one's surprise, the residents of 220 were not so keen on moving out. So the firm faced an expensive battle.
I believe in the end, they were paid between $1.3 and $1.6 million each to leave. Right? That's a good chunk of money for the average New Yorker.
The project took so long and cost so much more than expected that Claret's upside was essentially wiped out. Vornado wrote them a check for their troubles and assumed full control. Building a skyscraper like this is a marathon, and not everyone has the stamina to last.
Stephen Roth is known primarily as an office landlord. He took a really significant interest in 220 because the site for it was directly opposite his own office.
Catherine Clark is a journalist and author who became known as a kind of sleuth of Billionaires Row, uncovering the big buyers on the block.
And so he would look out his window and he would see that site and he would think, that's the best site in New York. I need to build a condo there.
So far, so New York. But just as this legal battle was unfolding, a Trojan Horse had stealthily entered the field of play.
Enter Gary Barnett, the founder of Extel Development.
He is a very prominent developer in New York, kind of loves complexity, is someone addicted to complexity and messy, decades-long projects.
Around the time Roth was facing resident lawsuits in 2005, Barnett bought a partial stake in a 13-year lease at a basement parking garage directly below 220 Central Park South. He then went on to acquire an additional small parcel right in the middle of the Vornado development site. Why, you may ask? Well, Barnett was the owner of a nearby development site between 57th and 58th Street, and he hopes to build his own luxury property there, complete with Central Park views and their accompanying price tags. No views means less money, so when he heard that a building at the 220 site might go up, he swung into action and set up a bargaining chip to use against Vornado in the future. By the time Vornado wanted to clear the site in 2011, Barnett pulled out his ace card.
So Vornado find this all out. What's their reaction? I guess they're not happy, right?
They're not happy at all. They're trying to sue the hell out of these guys and trying to get them out of there.
Finally, in 2013, Vornado folded and agreed to pay $194 million for the tiny Extel-owned parcel and its air rights in the middle of their development site. That's a whopping $1,400 a foot, more than twice the going rate at the time. And in an arrangement to preserve each other's views, Extel moved what would eventually become the mammoth Central Park Tower to the east, while Vornado shifted 220 slightly to the west. Extel's supertall skyscraper also introduced a cantilever that extended 8.5 metres out above the Art Students League of New York building for the small payout of $32 million, thus ensuring more units could keep their views of the park. At last, Vornado could move forward with its plans.
Or so they thought. Construction here in New York is anything but cheap, even for a titan of a developer like Vornado. So the firm reached out to someone with even deeper pockets.
I owe the Bank of China a lot of money. Okay? I am in the suck-up business to the Bank of China.
To build 220 Central Park South, Roth borrowed a cool $600 million from the Bank of China in 2014, followed by an extra $350 million a year later. By this point, 220 Central Park South had been years in the making. It had secured developers, funding, and cleared a plot of land in busy Midtown Manhattan. Now it was time for the fun part, and architect Robert A.M. Stern was hired to handle the design. 220 Central Park South is a truly remarkable feat of construction. Its rectangular form rises 290 metres into the sky, but measures just 16 metres across. That's a width-to-height ratio of 1:18. But to go up, construction teams first had to dig down. Through controlled blasting and painstaking rock hammering, they excavated 15 metres into the bedrock and installed 3 2.5 metre thick concrete slabs and 142 rock anchors. Working so close to existing buildings, they constantly monitored them to ensure their structures weren't being affected. With the foundations complete, construction crews moved above ground and began constructing the skyscraper's most critical structural element, its spine, the concrete core. Take a look at your standard skyscraper floor plan and you'll always see the core in the middle. It means your structural beams that hold each of the floors up can run out to the perimeter columns and don't have far to go. It's also where you'll always see the elevator shafts, services, stairs and bathrooms. It makes for a good vertical access route up through your structure, and it means that people in your tower are all going to get natural light and a nice view out. But there was only one view that mattered at 220 Central Park South. The Real Deal got a hold of the floor plans, and we've recreated them to show exactly how wealth is shaping engineering decisions in this building. To maximise saleable area, the core was pushed to the southern perimeter. Any interior columns were eliminated to create an open, flexible floor plan in the apartments, and that now much larger gap between the core and the northern perimeter was bridged with a 28cm thick concrete slab. Towers like this are subject to extreme wind loads and a phenomenon called vortex shedding, where differing air currents can pull up the structure, causing it to sway. To counteract this, 220 includes an 1,100-ton swinging weight in a space near its summit, known as a tuned mass damper. With 118 apartments, the 220 project combines a shorter 18-storey structure known as the Villa with a much taller 70-storey tower behind it. But precast or hand-set limestone wouldn't work for a building this tall, so a limestone curtain wall system was developed instead. Unlike glass, this material is opaque, and that allowed engineers to hide more spandrel beams behind it around the perimeter of the tower. When combined with the shear walls between the smaller apartments on the lower levels, this approach helped further improve the building's overall strength and stiffness. Finally, an unusual mega-frame concept was adopted. This grouped the main perimeter columns on the northern facade into 4. The columns were much larger, but they helped to maximise those Central Park views. Another illustration of how almost every inch of this building has been shaped by the market it's targeting. The tower was expensive, to say the least. We couldn't get our hands on official figures, but Steve Roth claimed Vornado was spending around $5,000 per square foot on construction. That eye-watering sum would be way above the circa $3,000 that other Billionaires Row towers spent, and quite clearly in a whole different galaxy to your average walk-up apartment. It's a budget that gets you all kinds of things, from oak flooring and marble cladding to saltwater pools. In total, the building cost around $1.5 billion. Roth went big, confident that he could up the sale price, and it worked. Vornado went on to drive more than $3 billion in sales. Roth had built the most profitable condo in the world. But to get returns like that, you've got to think outside the box.